Welcome to This Explainer. When you picture heaven, what's the very first thing that comes to mind? If you're like most of us, you're probably picturing fluffy clouds, harps, and, well, a massive crowd of believers walking around wearing these huge, heavy, literal golden crowns, right? Honestly, that sounds like an absolute recipe for an eternity of neck cramps. It's this super popular, super familiar image that's been deeply rooted in centuries of art and tradition. But is the biblical promise of a heavenly crown really meant to be taken as an inventory of literal shiny headwear? Well, today we're going to look closely at the source material to completely unpack the profound reality behind this famous imagery. Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a fantastic roadmap for our journey today. First up, the popular concept versus the reality. Then, we'll look at victor versus royal crowns. Third, one great heavenly reward. Fourth, stars in your crown. And finally, giving credit to God. So, starting off with section 1, the popular concept versus the reality, looking beyond heavenly jewelry. Because the Bible repeatedly promises crowns to those who belong to Christ, it's incredibly easy to just imagine heaven as a place literally filled with shiny headpieces. Which begs the obvious question, will we literally wear crowns? Now, to be fair, we can't completely dismiss the possibility of some physical dimension. After all, Revelation does portray elders wearing visible crowns. But the source text points out something fascinating. Scripture never actually gives a description detailed enough to prove every single redeemed person is going to wear a specific physical object on their head. Instead of, a celestial jewelry store, the text suggests something way deeper. The crown appears to be a really powerful biblical metaphor, representing a victorious reward and a glorious consummation. It's not just an object, it is a massive spiritual metaphor. To really grasp this metaphor, we've got to look at the Apostle Paul. In 1 Corinthians 9:25, he writes, "They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." See, Paul is drawing directly from the athletic world of his day. Picture an ancient runner finally crossing the finish line and getting a woven wreath placed on his head. That wreath, it's not valuable because of a few dead leaves. It's valuable because of what it signifies. Paul uses the idea of a crown conceptually. It simply equals a victory that has been fully recognized and rewarded. Moving right along to section 2, victor versus royal crowns, the language of victory. Now, to truly unlock the theology here, we need to do a really quick linguistic deep dive into the original Greek words used in the Bible. Now, what's really interesting to point out here is the striking distinction between two very specific Greek words. First, we have Stephanos. This is that victor's wreath we just talked about, representing victory, reward, faithful endurance, and what is won. This is the predominant word associated with believers. The second word, though, is diadema. That's a royal crown. It represents sovereignty, kingship, ruling authority, what is possessed by right. The source text highlights a massive theological distinction here. Believers, the redeemed, receive the victor's wreath, the Stephanos. But Christ, he possesses the royal crown, the diadema. And Christ's crowns are fundamentally different from ours. When Jesus was crucified, he was crowned with thorns, which, was intended as pure mockery. But Hebrews 2:9 gives us this ultimate cosmic reversal. We see Jesus now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death. The mockery literally became honor. The apparent defeat became the ultimate victory. The source material emphasizes that our victor's crowns, they only exist because of his royal victory. Our victory is entirely participatory in his. Which brings us to section 3, one great heavenly reward, the faces of the reward. Now, Scripture actually lists several different types of crowns. But are they really separate items you're supposed to stack up on your head? Let's look at the perspectives of this reward. The Bible mentions the crown of life, the crown of righteousness, the crown of glory, the imperishable crown, and the crown of rejoicing. The author of our source text proposes a really compelling view here. Rather than a literal catalog of 5 different hats you somehow earn, these are actually multifaceted angles of one grand outcome. For example, the crown of life simply means that life itself is the victorious reward. The crown of glory means unfading glory is the outcome. So instead of earning 5 separate objects, the believer receives the absolute fullness of God's victorious reward, described beautifully through these really varied descriptive images. Let's see how this builds our understanding of how we actually quote-unquote earn these crowns. Check out this progression. It starts with grace, which leads to faith, causing a transformed life, resulting in faithfulness, bringing about perseverance, which finally yields the reward. Earning a crown is absolutely not about independent human achievement somehow purchasing salvation. No way. God gives the grace, the strength, the opportunity, and the growth. The reward is simply God graciously honoring what his own grace accomplished within us. It is quite literally grace all the way to the end. that transitions us perfectly into section 4, stars in your crown, focusing on stars and people. You might be familiar with that old hymn, Will There Be Any Stars in My Crown? Well, let's see how the biblical reality is actually far more profound than just having literal shiny objects glued to a golden band. The foundational text for this idea is Daniel 12:3. It says, "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." Now notice carefully what Daniel does not say here. He doesn't say stars are physically attached to heavenly crowns like little trophies. Instead, the transformed, righteous people themselves shine brightly. It's the believers who radiate God's glory. We see this exact same idea echoed by Paul. In his letters, Paul literally calls the people he has ministered to his joy and crown. When we synthesize Daniel and Paul, we get this breathtaking picture. The real stars are people. The eternal fruit of a faithful life, the people whose lives were touched by God's grace through a believer's ministry, becomes that believer's eternal joy and reward. Imagine discovering in heaven that a simple act of kindness, or maybe a quiet prayer, actually helped someone remain faithful. That person is the living testimony. They are the real, beautiful star in your crown. And that brings us to our fifth and final section, giving credit to God, which is the ultimate act of worship. To really grasp this, we've got to look at this incredible cosmic vision found in the book of Revelation. Let's actually slow down for a second and just take this scene in. Revelation 4 tells us the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne. They lay their crowns before the throne. See, John sees visible crowns. The elders are wearing them, but then they take them off and they surrender them to God. They aren't clutching them. They definitely aren't comparing them to see whose is bigger. They just cast them right at his feet. And this brilliantly illustrates the total paradox of heavenly rewards. Think about earthly ambition. It says, I want the reward so everyone will know how great I am. But heavenly worship, it says, I receive the reward and then I use the reward to show how great God is. A crown is the ultimate earthly symbol of status, right? Yet in heaven, the redeemed use it as an instrument of pure, selfless humility. The reward itself becomes an instrument of worship. So the crucial point is this: casting the crown does not mean you're throwing the reward away because you don't want it. It means you are refusing to claim independent credit for it. By laying down the crown, the redeemed are basically saying, this life came from God. Whatever righteousness is found in me, it originated with God. My glory is just derivative, His is ultimate. The eternal fruit was always His. It's this beautiful acknowledgement that you are not the ultimate explanation for what you have become. You know, the concept of the crown answers a deeply human question that I think we all carry around. Did my faithfulness actually matter? And the crown says, yes. Yes to the suffering. Yes to the perseverance. Yes to those quiet, unnoticed acts of love you thought literally no one saw. Yes to encouraging others. And yes, for sure, to remaining faithful in secret. Grace doesn't make faithfulness meaningless. Grace makes it possible. And God graciously chooses to validate it with a crown that gives your everyday actions eternal significance. The crown, ultimately, is a lot less about a physical object and way more about a completed story. It's the victorious completion of the grace God worked in your life, which leaves us with a quiet but absolutely profound question to end on today. If God placed the completed story of your life before you right now, would you want to lay it at His feet? Think about that as you go about your daily, quiet acts of faithfulness this week. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you next time.